Hello everyone. Everyone's favorite subject to fight about, so this should be fun. All right, so people might have noticed that you can often, maybe you're getting an email about a survey, maybe you're just seeing a news headline. One will say that being in the office full-time will make your workers more productive, and then the next day you might see one that says, wait, being hybrid or being fully remote will make your workers more productive. Why do we get conflicting information about this, and what is the actual answer?
Okay, that's a nice short question. Why do we get conflicting information? The reason it's
not my fault, to be clear.
The conflicting information is it really depends on the task. So there are certain tasks, like if you're working in a call center, are actually more productively done fully remotely. So there's a bunch of studies now. If you're in a call center, the big thing is quiet. So if you're working at home, it's a lot quieter. For the types of jobs that I guess folks here and my students, my MBAs, my undergrads at Stanford have focused on, generally hybrid looks the best. Katie and I were just talking earlier. So there's one piece of research I think is really useful if you're trying to persuade a CEO or a board that hybrid is a good thing to do. We had a study that was published in Nature last year, so it came out in June of 2024. What we did is for a company called Trip.com. They're a large multinational travel agent. They're worth about $40 billion. They're a NASDAQ-listed company. They took 1,600 employees, and they did a massive A/B test. So they randomized, if you have an even birthday, so you're born on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th of the month, you have to come in for all 5 days. And if you have an odd birthday like me on May the 5th, you got to work from home on Wednesday and Friday. So exactly like tech will test, A/B test. So we scientifically tested that. We then followed these folks for 24 months. So the question is, what did we find? So we found two things. First finding is there was no effect on performance. So the metrics we had are promotions, performance reviews, leadership scores, innovation scores. To tell you who they were, so they're all graduates. Around half of them are accounting, finance, and marketing, and the other half are computer coders. So for the coders, we have lines of code written. There was just no effect on performance at all. And you went out and interviewed them, and they'd say, of course, there's a huge benefit of coming in the office. It's great for mentoring, it's better for innovation, it's better for building culture. Really useful. But by the time you've got 3 days a week in the office, it's not obvious that days 4 and 5 are useful. And they'd say, if you think of what we're getting for home time, is it's quieter, which if you want to do deep work and concentrate, it's better. And B, I'm saving about an hour and a half a day by working from home. And they said, look, at about 3 days, net, those days 4 and 5, there's about a wash versus being in the office versus working from home. So fact one, hybrid had no effect on performance. Fact two is quit rates fell by 35% because people liked it. They didn't like, they liked the 2 days a week they had to work from home. And for the company, for Trip, for the C-suite, for the CEO, Jane Sun, and the board, they said this is massively profitable because every person that quits costs us something like $30,000 to $50,000 to go out, re-advertise, re-interview, re-get up to speed. And so they rolled it out. And so I kind of stopped there. Hybrid. I get asked all the time, what's the effect on productivity? And I'm like, that's not the right question. It's actually profitability. And if you're for a company, I was talking to the head of HR, actually now he's just stepped down, of J&J this morning, asking him about the pressures. And he said the biggest pressures from the shareholders. And that's why they're hybrid, because it's extremely profitable.
All right, so for people who might be skeptical of everything you just said, how can they themselves measure productivity in the best way? How do you even do that to know where your workers are most productive?
I mean, that's a hard question.
Why would I ask easy questions?
No. Measuring productivity is difficult. For certain tasks, it's relatively straightforward. So again, call centers, data entry. I worked in McKinsey. I worked in McKinsey. I worked in the Treasury, the UK government. I now obviously at Stanford. Across those tasks, measuring productivity is not that easy. So for what I do right now, it would be teaching. Do I turn up and teach? What's my teaching performance like? Do I publish research? Do I do administration tasks? I think I'll give you a kind of another, learning I got from talking. I probably talked to like 1,000+ companies right now. Was talking to Marissa Mayer at Yahoo, and a theme that's come up over and over again. So Marissa Mayer used to be the CEO of Yahoo, And for those of you that can remember, there was this big thing in 2013 when she banned work from home. And there was a media storm. And she was the CEO of Yahoo 2012 to 2016. She banned working from home in 2013. And so I interviewed her a couple of years ago and said, like, what happened? What really went on? And Marissa said, well, when I took over at Yahoo, there was not a lot of great performance management. So you couldn't really tell what people were doing and how hard they were working. So the system was have them in their seats. It's kind of, as the British would say, bums in seats, sit there watching, when I walk by, are they working away at their computer? When I walk by and look at the computer screen, is it Python or is it Word or Excel or, are they watching Champions League or, you can kind of tell, are they basically working? She said, the problem is when people are at home, it's very hard to measure inputs. And she said, look, when I first turned up, there was not good performance evaluation. So what I did is I put this stuff in place. I got people back into the office. I got productivity measures, performance measures. Once that was up and running, I could let them work from home again, typically 3 days a week. So on your question, I don't have exactly the solution to how to measure performance, but it is critical to letting people work from home. Because if you were my manager, you don't want to be, and I'm working from home, you don't want to be like breathing down my neck every minute, like, Nick, are you online? Are you on Slack? Are you on email? And in reverse, I don't want to feel like I have to be at my desk if I want to go to the doctor or, pick my kids up from school. So if you have a performance evaluation for me, you can relax a bit. I can work remotely. So that is something else that's come up over and over again. And why for HR has become pretty critical for this is make sure you have good performance evaluations.
Okay, maybe a case like team by team even, like just make it more specific?
Yeah, I mean, as another anecdote, when I was at McKinsey, we'd have a grid of various metrics. It's like client deliverables, leadership, training people. It depends on the role. And it would have, a scale of 0 to 3. And you'd be given points for each dimension and taking an average of them.
Okay. So we have seen in recent months some large, well-known companies calling their workers back 5 days a week. And we have also seen that it does not appear to be quite as easy as just winding back the clock to 2019 and saying, we all work 5 days a week in the office again. We've seen, a lack of desks or people upset that there's nowhere to park or they're going into the office, but then they're sitting there and they're on Zoom meetings for, 6 of the 8 hours and say, why am I here? So I guess question is, why is it challenging to bring people back 5 days a week? Why is it not so simple as just we used to do this way not that long ago?
Yes, so one comment is on, Amazon is the name that everyone has in mind. I read, and for everyone I've talked to reads the Amazon move as a way to reduce headcount. So if you read Andrew Jassi's memo at the time it went out, it talked about how they were too big, how they wanted to be more nimble, have less layers of management. One way they could have done that is, of course, lay people off. Another way is haul people back to the office for 5 days a week and hope some of those people are going to quit. So what the federal government is doing now are kind of in this camp A of firms that want to downsize and see a 5-day return to office as a way to force a bunch of people to quit. So I'm not particularly advocating that, but you should read that not as they think 5 days is necessarily best, but they see it as a way to do a downsize.
The company has denied that, but I'm not denying it. They've denied it to me for a story I did on this, so I feel like I
what
have
they
to
say in
that.
public and what I hear in private. But
there you go.
So
we'll leave it at that.
The problem, I've talked to quite a lot of companies. In fact, there's a data analytics company I was talking to last week about RTO mandates, and they said a couple of things. One thing is they've worked with about 30 clients. There's that you see the number of days people are actually in the office measured by swipes or Wi-Fi logins is roughly 50% of the numbers they're supposed to be. Okay. So if you're requiring 4, typically you're seeing 2. Second fact is they said normally these numbers are higher after the RTO is announced. It's like, as a parent having a new bedtime rule for your kids. You kind of enforce it for a month or two and then it gets forgotten about. And they said the reason is it's just really hard to enforce it. So take, take Amazon, right? So in Amazon, many of the managers aren't particularly on board with the 5 days. So imagine Katie's my manager. Imagine I'm a high performer in Amazon. I tell Katie, look, if you make me come back to the office 5 days a week, I'm going to leave. I'm going to maybe apply to Microsoft to do something else. Katie's incentive are to perform well for her team because it affects her bonus and it affects her promotions. Now imagine she says to me, Nick, tell you what, you can work from home 2 days a week. Don't worry about it. I'm doing that.
Shh, don't tell anyone.
Be quiet. At some point, HR contacts Katie and says, we've noticed this employee of yours, Nick Bloom, is only coming in 3 days a week. Of course, what Katie can do is tell HR, oh, but he's out traveling for business, he's out meeting clients, he's at trade shows. That's really helpful for his work. It's very hard for HR to know otherwise. And so what's happening is there's very weak enforcement, partly because the data isn't there. Even in companies where they have data, in order to enforce, you've got to have a strong mandate. So take Katie, her objective is to meet her, to perform well for her team, because it drives her promotion and her bonus. So even if she knows I'm not there, she has no incentive. So as a result, these headline RTO mandates are only about 50% met. So if you notice, the state of California just recalled, Gavin Newsom just said folks are going to be in the office 4 days a week. My guess is in practice you'll see 2.
Okay.
It's going to be very hard to enforce it. You've got to measure swipes and Wi-Fi logins, make sure people are there, they're not, send emails, harass them, etc.
And have enough desks, in theory.
Yes.
All right, so I know we were just talking about Amazon, also, JP Morgan. There are, it seems like these large companies that have called people back 5 days. And then, of course, you see a lot of headlines about that and a lot of sort of speculation about whether we are, in a wave of 5-day RTO. Are we about to see a wave? And you have some new research on the direction that we're headed in. And so where are we headed with this?
Yes. So one of the things I get asked all the time is, surely everyone's returned to the office. The media is full of stories of return to the office. If you look at, one of the companies in there was Zoom. And in fact, I don't know if anyone here works at Zoom. I was talking to Eric Yuan like 2 weeks ago. And Eric says, look, in Zoom, we are back in the office, but we're in 2 days a week. So the engineering team comes in Monday, Wednesday. The sales team comes in Tuesday, Thursday. And so partly it feels like people are RTOing, but they're back 2-3 days a week. They're definitely not back 5. If you look at the data going back, what you see is looking at either swipes from folks like Castle or cell phone from folks like Placer.ai or the census surveys, is work from home is dropping from 2021, 22, 23. And then it's kind of flat. So the last 18 months, we haven't seen much movement. So, and what we put out literally early, a couple of hours earlier today, is in February, so from the 10th to 21st, so really only 2-3 weeks ago, Stanford with the Atlanta Fed surveyed about 1,000 US businesses. So this is typically CEOs, CFOs, pretty senior people. And we asked them about their return to office plans looking ahead a year from now. And 85% of them said they have no plans to change. About 15% said they had plans, but they weren't all increasing, so some were reductions. When you add, and mostly they were like, well, we're going to go from 3 to 4 days. If you added all the numbers up, the reduction from days in the office was something like 21% of days to 20%. So the big data I've seen suggests there is not a major return to the office. Some firms like Amazon are heading back, others like just blank, the big Allstate are heading towards more remote work. Net, we're seeing it's about 0. So
Okay.
I personally, looking back for the last 2 years, we haven't seen any change. I don't think there's going to be much major change outside of the government sector looking ahead.
Okay. There seems to be a fair amount of data out there that workers don't tend to love 5 days in the office. Some obviously also don't like 4 in the office or even 3. I know you alluded to this earlier, that hybrid is this nice happy medium. I guess, how do you implement hybrid in a way that it's most effective as far as productivity, not being bad for morale in any way, being effective? Like you and I have talked about this before, this idea of choice versus coordination. So, in a worker's mind, they might be like, oh, I have to go in 3 days a week. Great, I'm gonna go in on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and I'm gonna work from home Thursday and Friday. If their manager is going in on different days, that might not be quite so effective. Then if you have coordination, that means, people are going in on the same days. And that, in theory, should be better for, collaboration and innovation and all the things that we hear people benefit, from being in person. But it seems that there are trade-offs to each model. So what is, from what you know, what is the best model of hybrid?
Yeah, the most common model, the model I generally advise is, the most common model is 3 days in the office, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So they're kind of two things are making hybrid work. One is definitely coordination.
Okay.
So when everyone's had this experience. They've interviewed employees, or they've had their own experience. They've come into the office, and it's half empty. and you have to get on a Zoom call, and you're like, why did I come in? Why did I spend like 45 minutes driving in, getting ready for work, etc., and coming back again just to sit on Zoom and be in my office all day? And there's kind of a greater good sense, even if you have 7 or 8 people in your team, even if 1 or 2 people work from home, you find this situation, you have a team meeting, you've now got to go to a conference room, got to get a screen, connect in, you can't do it from the cafeteria, etc. And so one of the critical things is coordination. And coordination generally has been not Fridays. People really want to work from home on Fridays. People really want to work from home on Mondays. In fact, there was a friend of mine in London, and I said, her firm had Choice, and I said, what days, she works for a big law firm, and I said, what days do you go in? And she says, I go into work Monday and Fridays. And I said, that's kind of weird. That's unusual. She said, yeah, I hate my colleagues. So I was like, okay, that seems a totally failed situation. So you basically want to coordinate on 3 days or 2 days. There's no exact science on how many days. So that's something I'll be very open about. I really honestly don't know, and there's no hard evidence. My guess is something like 2, 3, maybe 4. It depends on the role. The other thing is kind of enforce properly on that. And enforcement's a lot easier if you have a sensible policy. There's an old Roman saying that a good law is an easy to enforce law. So if you do, I was up in DC, and there were two firms, very similar firms. One of them had just 2 days that they wanted folks to come in, Tuesday, Thursday. They enforced that everyone comes in